I often complain about how much I dislike the United States, but what I find to be strange about Canada is that it is somehow a country which is even worse than the United States, while somehow convincing the entire world that they're literally the better version of the United States. Not only does Canada have, at least as of the recording of this video, they could greatly roll these things back, worse protections for air quality, they also have an economy which pays people less money for the same work, right? Um, and somehow this is all while having even worse passenger rail than the US and even worse public transit infrastructure than the major cities in the US. The best Canadian cities for public transit still have far worse public transit than the equivalent cities in the United States. And so when you look at the issues that I really care a lot about, urbanism, um, good paying jobs, air quality protections, Canada is not there. It doesn't surprise me that all of the most polluted cities on this continent are located in Canada because they don't have federal air quality protections. I go there and I try to breathe in the air and I'm like, please just get me back to the United States, right? Um, it's cool that they have universal health care, but also it is a dilapidated system that barely functions. That's not because there's a problem with universal health care, it's because the people that run their government have deliberately chosen to underfund the system and to, not allow it to function. So it's cool that they have that. I would prefer it. I would prefer it if we had even like a bad version of universal healthcare like what they have. But that's basically the one good thing that they have. Besides that, like they have nothing. They only just got proper tribal recognition within what, the past 5 years? Like, you guys weren't properly treating indigenous people until like 2020. Like, what was going on with that? It's wild. I mean, some of the stuff about that country is just wild. Everything is way too expensive there, um, which is helped in no small part by the completely insane carbon tax that they have, which has been proven to be an ineffective tweak around the edges for climate change in the face of the much more substantial investments in infrastructure that they could have been making by taxing the top 1%, which of course, support both parties there in the form of lobbying. It's just a shitty country, which makes sense because it's located in North America, but like it's so strange to me that the people there are are so willing to portray themselves as like better Americans, as like, oh, we're like America but like actually good. It's like you're like America but worse. It's I'm not hating on Canadians or the natural beauty that they have in the country. There's so many great people from Canada, and they've got these beautiful you know forests and monuments and things like that. Although they could stand to take down the monuments to Nazi collaborators that they have all over their country. Literally the most monuments to Nazi collaborators of any country on Earth. That's a little strange. They should do something about that. But there's a lot of beautiful stuff in that nation. But I don't want them to be a part of the US. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not trying to shit up my own country by adding, even more mediocrity to the mediocre country we already have. And that's to say nothing about the sovereignty of nations, right? How can you go around and threaten sovereign nations which have only served to benefit America and Americans? It doesn't make any sense, right? So it's like it's bad on multiple levels. It's like, even if I didn't have problems with imperialism or imperialists, I would still have a problem with this because I don't want to add, even more mediocrity to what is already a mediocre nation in the form of the United States. Um, so I don't like the 51st state talk. Uh, I mean, think about it. It's like, imagine you were like a really die-hard patriotic American or just moderately patriotic. How would you feel if another country went up to you and was like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna take you over," like we're, you're actually a part of us. Let's just take it all. You would probably feel pretty bad, right? Now, of course, I'm no fan of America, so I will happily say, make us the next province of China or whatever. But like, that's just because I don't have any particular attachment to this place in its current form. I have an attachment to a lot of the people who live here, to my upbringing and a lot of the things that I learned, by being an American. I have an attachment to some of the beliefs that I have as a result of being, brought up in a liberal democracy with an interesting history. And I love American history with the pioneers and mountain men and, things like that. But, um, it's also like not a thing that I'm married to. I'm not married to the concept of being an American because I think, the entire idea of nation states just serves to divide people, right? It serves to divide human beings that, are human at the end of the day. It's just that they happen to be born within a legal boundary which allows for you to be subject to certain laws, right? This boundary around the United States means that you are subject to the criminal code of the United States. Um, it doesn't really mean anything else. It's just an arbitrary boundary. The boundary around Canada is just as arbitrary, but the same goes with literally any other nation. You know, Obviously, being within that boundary, leads you to develop a certain sensibilities, have a certain culture, etc., speaking a certain language. But are those things inherently valuable? Probably not, right? Um, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have empathy for people who don't want to be subjugated and don't want to have great powers attempt to grab their homes and their land, right? I think in an ideal world we wouldn't have borders over any country because we would all be cooperating as humans, right? Through our shared humanity and the recognition that cooperation on the issues that humanity is facing writ large is going to be much more valuable for all of us than bickering with one another over differences, right? Minor differences. That isn't to say that all cultures are created equal, right? A culture that values rape or murder or something is not going to be cool, right? But I think what we should be fostering is a kind of shared global culture that recognizes human rights and seeks to distribute resources in a more efficient and equal way. Where we're actually producing less overall as a world, but distributing, the resources that we do have more effectively as to lift the impoverished nations out of poverty and make sure that all of us prosper more so, especially those which are at the bottom of the economic ladder. That's really what I would like to see. And I think you do that by recognizing that the enemy is not people who have different nationalities, but rather the enemy is an international capitalist class which seeks to subjugate the working class of the various countries. People who work for a living, people who have jobs, are international. That's an international thing. And the robber barons which are seeking to strip mine the working class of their resources are also international. You think these people hold allegiance to one nation? They have money in the Cayman Islands and in other tax havens. You know, they have citizenships to multiple countries. These are people that literally talk about having passport portfolios. You think they care about you, or, you know, the people within your arbitrary borders? No, they don't. But they want you to care about those things because it divides the working class, you know, both against itself, right? You know, it causes people to have disdain towards immigrants and other working class people, but also, you know, it divides us from an international perspective as well because we can't collaborate, you know, with the people of all countries towards the singular goal of liberation. Um, and so, like, you know, my meme answer to the 51st state talk is to say, like, Canada sucks because it does. Like, I don't want that in my country. But also, like, if I were to give a more honest, you know, uh, intellectual, I guess, as much as I hate that word and the pretentious kind of trappings that come with it, um, you know, if I were to give a more thoughtful answer, let's say, to the question of should Canada be the 51st state, it would be to say that there should be no states, and moreover that there should be no countries, right? We should have a kind of one world government that organizes the economy from a rational perspective that seeks to lift up all people within its borders and you know, make sure that we're living happy and fulfilling lives, that we have access to clean air, clean water, clean food, that we have to work as little as possible, you know, while distributing the resources that we're able to create as efficiently as possible so that people have time to live, time for recreation, time to pursue their dreams. That's the kind of world that I want to live in. And we're not going to get there by further alienating the broad swath of humanity, certainly on this continent, from one another. You know, we're not going to do that. We're not going to get there by doing that, and it's a shame. I mean, all of this is a shame. At the very least, we should have some sort of, like, I don't know, free movement of people from the US and Canada. Why don't we have that yet? Like, we're the most culturally similar countries on the entire planet with the longest border of any two countries in the world. Why can't Americans work there and Canadians work here? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But we're never going to get that after these tariff threats, man. We are never going to get more free trade and increased cooperation with the way that they're doing things. So that's even more of a shame, you know. I'm not a fan of capitalism or neoliberalism, but tariffs and protectionism only serve to reinforce the existing economic order, which is capitalism, right? You know, at least by having these you know, bilateral or multilateral trade agreements which bring countries closer together, you can start to have that conversation, that broader conversation about internationalism. But no, we're not there.